welcome to It Takes a Village, Raising Resilient Kids in Today's World. My name is Dr. Bergen, and the purpose of this series of programs is to focus on how we can come together in our community to support our young people as they strive to find lives of meaning and purpose. And lately, as we know, some of our young people have been struggling, and substance abuse disorder has become a rather serious problem, not just in Franklin, but really across the country. Our community has come together, and a key person in that effort is my guest today, Mr. Jim Derick. He is chair of the SAFE Coalition with the mission of addressing this issue head on. I've had the chance to get to know Mr. Derick and realize how lucky we are to have him. He is a compassionate and a courageous man, and he's willing to share his story with us and really shed light on this devastating issue. So I welcome Jim today.
Thank you.
And I was wondering if you could sort of start, before you share your very own story, if you could sort of let us know about the SAFE Coalition, the acronym, what it stands for, how you became so involved in it. If you could start with that and just tell the community, just to refresh, most people are aware of the SAFE Coalition, but if you could speak specifically to that and its mission and purpose.
Sure, I'd be happy to, Ann. First of all, thank you very much for your kind words. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate being here today. The SAFE Coalition, the acronym stands for Support for Addicts and Families by Empowerment, or through empowerment. We came up with that acronym as we realized that more and more families were affected by the substance abuse disorder disease, and it really had become an epidemic. Early on, Jennifer Knight, who had been a Franklin student, I believe while you were in the Franklin schools, and Representative Jeffrey Roy and some members of the town council were reacting to a series of fatal drug overdoses that involved students that they had had or had coached, neighbors, friends, families of friends that were affected. And they started to react by that by getting together and saying, what is going on here? We have an epidemic, particularly with opiates. How can we stem this tide? You know, in one particular evening, there was another overdose of a firefighter's nephew, and at that moment, they had decided that enough was enough. They were ready to launch a community coalition in response to this. So the SAFE Coalition was really born at that moment under their leadership, and came together with a forum in June, which saw over 300 community people come out to hear a panel discuss the crisis. And the panel ranged all the way from the chief of police through medical providers, social service providers, our state representative Jeffrey Roy, who was leading the effort. And it was really just a discussion about the current landscape. People were very, very concerned. I remember Jeff telling me early on he expected 30 or 40 people to come out to that. To have 300 people come out was really something. The second forum had more people come out, and that was a forum on the neurobiology of addiction with Dr. Kelly from Harvard University. And it was clear to us that we had touched a nerve in the community, that it was more than us that were just concerned. And it was our mission to try to get out there, provide some support to families, provide some education on prevention, and critically to provide a way to reduce barriers to treatment, which is a major problem that I'll talk about later.
Yeah. I think what struck me at that first coalition meeting was just the level of pain of the families.
Yes.
And you could hear the anguish, just the sense of helplessness. And you kind of have your own story to share, which is part of what it means to be courageous, because I do believe in sharing our stories. That's how we really touch the most people and reach the most people, because anyone who's been through it has the most to share from their wisdom and experience and everything that they've gone through. So you said that, and I know that's been part of your mission, is to share your story, and that's something that you're willing to do today, and
Absolutely.
sort of tell us sort of how this happened for you, your involvement in your own family, and certainly how your coping mechanisms and how you've dealt with it, and the way you can share that wisdom with other people.
Sure, I'd be happy to. There was a time when I wasn't willing to share this story. The disease of substance abuse is one that's shrouded in shame. There's a lot of shame. There's a shame for families, stigma for those that are impacted, whether it be the addict themselves or the parents. And I think it's time that we step out of the shadows and call it for what it is, which is a chronic disease without treatment will result in disability and or death. And that describes a lot of chronic illness.
Absolutely.
So I made a decision that along the way that I wanted to come out and speak directly to people that might also be impacted by this. And hopefully, by them hearing my story, they may be able to hear some common thread, and they may be able to raise their hands and say, I need some help. And I've had great response to that, but I must say that it wasn't my idea. I had mentors in this process, people that came out before me. They had a wonderful rally in Washington, D.C., Unite to Face Addiction, where parents were telling their stories. Our nation's drug czar is a alcoholic in long-term recovery.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
So more and more we're talking about
Right.
it. So you asked me about my story. My story is this. I have 3 wonderful children, all boys, sons. 2 of them went through the Franklin schools. And my middle son started to show signs of substance abuse disorder as early as 12 or 13 years of age.
Yeah.
We really didn't know what we were looking at. We saw mood swings. We saw a change in attitude, a change in the type of people he was associating with. We did find some paraphernalia somewhere around his 14 or 15-year age, and it was all marijuana related. And you know, we took the normal steps that parents would take. You're grounded. We want to drug test you, that type of thing. Along the way, there was some really severe episodes of drinking, more so than you would call partying. Anytime it's underage, it's a bad thing, but these were really severe episodes of drinking. So we started to find vodka bottles around the house, realized we had a more serious problem. So we did intervene, we took him into counseling, and we did the best that we knew, frankly, that we knew how to do. And when I think about it, I revisit it all the time. The common theme that parents have is, what did I do wrong? What did I miss? And I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that I replay this record in my head fairly regularly. The fact of the matter is, he had a much more severe problem than we realized. He was in 4 car accidents. Wow. And along the way, he became age 18. And the important part of that is, when you're 18 years old, your parents no longer have control over your medical process. So we were not able to admit him to hospitals without his consent, or to send him to counseling
and he didn't want
to.
He didn't want to. Yeah.
That's correct.
He didn't see that he had an issue. He couldn't accept it. Yeah.
No, would not accept it.
Yeah.
Unbeknownst to me, during that period of time, he was involved with heavier drugs, and specifically they would be Xanax, some of which was prescribed by well-meaning physicians and or psychologists attempting to address perceived anxiety problems. And the anxiety came on as the roller coaster ride of the ups and downs of drug use presented itself. So it really was symptomatic of drug use, but being not educated into what he was using, which now was beyond marijuana, we really thought that he had a major anxiety and was having major depressive episodes. And that led us on a journey that I would wish no parent to have to go through. He totaled 4 cars. The police could never seem to arrest him because he was very crafty in getting away from the scene and throwing the keys, and the police said that they couldn't get him on DUIs. And it all led into an escalating problem that included opiates and a variety of other drugs. And on March 23rd of 2015, he was going 80 miles an hour on Lincoln Street and rolled the car 6 times and was ejected 150 feet. And by the grace of God and an off-duty EMT by the name of Matt Hendon, who I will never forget, his life was saved. He wasn't breathing at the scene. We got that awful knock on the door at 11 o'clock at night saying your son's in a helicopter, and a very compassionate Franklin police officer put his arm around me and said, I said, is he going to live? And he said, I can't tell you he will, Mr. Derick. And that was the longest night of my life. And the next 4 to 6 weeks he was in a coma. and emerged from that coma, and we did intervene at that point and successfully had him admitted to rehab for drug and alcohol abuse.
So you were able to, at that point, he consented? Or was it because it was out of his hands and he could know, you could make the medical decisions for him? How did you get him, you know?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And this is really where the odyssey, I don't want to say begins, but
yeah.
this is the complication of our system right
yeah.
now. I went home one evening very despondent. I'd been up for probably 4 days straight at UMass Trauma Center in their waiting room, sleeping on the couches, and the nurses came out and said, look, he's not going to be awake. We're keeping him down for a while to heal with his brain injury and whatnot, so you really ought to go home and get some rest. So I went home, and I have a favorite comedian, Jimmy Tingle. So I thought, you know, I really need to just smile. I need to feel my face smile, so I'll watch Jimmy Tingle. Ironically enough, Jimmy Tingle has a nonprofit that he's established called Humor for Humanity. And he happened to be interviewing that night a gentleman by the name of Danny Lynch. He goes by Danny. Danny owns a business called Lynch Wellness and Recovery and raises money for a nonprofit arm of that for scholarships for people that can't afford quality rehabilitation for alcohol and drug and substance abuse. And he also does interventions. So I thought, my goodness, this cannot be an accident. And so I called that evening, and Danny Lynch called me the next morning and took our family under his wing and shepherded us through an intervention and eventually locating an appropriate treatment center. Our son was not willing to go.
That's the big question. Yeah, he wasn't. Yeah.
No, and even in the face, the impact of addiction is that it's far beyond anything that I can understand as a parent or somebody that doesn't have a substance abuse disorder. But the pull back to the drinking and drugging and thinking that he can control it was so strong that even in the face of literally coming as close to death as you possibly can as a human being, having no respiration at the scene, being within minutes of either brain death or physical death, he still wasn't convinced that he needed help.
It's the power of that disease, isn't it?
So we gathered our family and we did the intervention, not unlike you might see on the television program. It was particularly hard for us because he had so many physical injuries and he was just coming out of physical rehab. We did it when he thought he was being discharged to come home. It was a very, very painful process, but after 3.5 hours, he agreed to go. And
he did agree. The intervention, worked?
Yes.
And then how long was he there?
Okay, well, he started a 28-day program in Pennsylvania, and then he moved to Florida for just about 6 months, and now he is in a halfway house in Florida.
Wow.
So he's moving along through the program.
Long journey, though, huh?
Very long.
So in your role, and I've watched you kind of through your compassionate nature support parents going through this, and when you step back and you know they're desperate and they want to hear, what kind of advice do you give those that are in those parents that are struggling so with this, and their kids may not be willing to accept, you know, that they have an issue, particularly when they're young adults and the parents don't have control over it, and the young adult has chosen not to, and they're continuing to use substances and the parents are helpless. So what advice do you give them, or what are the resources out there, number one, for those parents that are just in the throes of that pain and agony that go along with it?
Right.
You know, it's
the first piece of advice. That's a great question, first of all, and it's one that I wish someone had presented in a public forum for me to hear back then. But the first piece of advice is for folks to know that they are not alone.
Yeah.
This is, since I've been involved with the coalition and have come out with my story, I have yet to find anybody that hasn't said, I have some sort of connection to substance abuse disorder, be it an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, a husband, a child.
Yeah.
So the first piece of advice is, no, you're not alone. So what does that mean? In Franklin right now, we have 3 support groups that run for parents and loved ones of people with substance abuse disorder. Now, I would recommend that if you suspect your child, regardless of their age, may have a problem and your gut tells you they have a problem, follow your gut instinct. As parents, we are pretty well trained. In my opinion, the desire is to want your child not to have this problem so badly. I didn't want my son to have this problem.
So you ignore some of the evidence and signs maybe a little bit.
Exactly right. So unlike a type 1 diabetic or somebody that might have a chronic disease or Lord forbid, cancer or something like that, those are things that you would immediately take somebody to Dana-Farber for. And I'm telling you now that when a child presents with a substance abuse disorder, so that what does that look like? Chronic use of any substance that causes a problem in their lives. Missed classes, missed homework, missed work, radical change in attitude. That is the definition of a problem, and that is the definition of abuse. So I would counsel people to immediately get with people that understand and immediately get their son or daughter or their loved one in front of a trained professional that deals in that area, not to wait. It is not to assume that it's a phase. That can have lethal consequences. And
so don't wait is the problem you're saying. Even if the risk of making a mistake, or just say, you know what, let's check this out. Just right. Okay, that's really important advice. That's, you know.
I can't emphasize how urgent it is, and treat it like any other illness.
But that's the problem, because so many parents think it's a failing on my part. I have to admit that I failed as a parent. If my kid's struggling, it must have been something that I did wrong, which is not the case at all. It's the nature of addiction, right? It's not. So it's that, first of all, recognizing it's not your fault, but you darn well better do something, right? So it's
right. It is, and the fault comes in my own case, in the enabling portion. So
speak about that, because that's huge.
It is huge. So when you have a loved one with substance abuse disorder, and you're a parent in particular, you want to make everything okay. You want them to be okay, and so a lot of times you assume that it's a behavioral problem, and you ignore the fact that it's a physical problem. So enabling is anything that would allow your child or loved one to stay in the state that they are in on a short-term, long-term basis. So I can give you some clear examples that are probably obvious. Giving them money.
Yeah.
Okay? Having them say to you, and an addict or somebody with substance abuse disorder is very manipulative.
Yes.
That just goes with the illness. So my son, as all addicts, I hear this story all the time, they become very manipulative, and they make you believe that they need money. If you suddenly find jewelry missing around the house and you don't say anything about it, I've heard parents say, well, I didn't want to get the police involved because I didn't want my son or daughter to be in trouble. Well, the reality is they're in a lot of trouble with their substance abuse disorder, so it really is important to intervene. Enabling can also be subtle. So seemingly subtle things, like I would give my son, ride to work all the time. What I was really doing was enabling him to earn a paycheck so that he could go out and purchase drugs and repeat this thing all over again, instead of saying to him, you need to save to buy a car and manage your own life. You're of majority age now, you're in your 20s. But I didn't want him to have to suffer by walking a couple of miles in the winter, so I continued to give him rides. And it can even drill down to something as simple as taking a phone call when you've had, let's say for instance in my case, I had an agreement with my son, if you fail a drug test, you are out on your own, unless you're willing to go to treatment, and I won't accept phone calls from you. And I broke that contract that I had with him multiple times. I'd be embarrassed to tell you how many times I broke that contract, because it goes against every grain in a parent's body. But it would have been the right thing to do, because it would have made it difficult for him to continue to use and easier for him to say, I need treatment.
You're right, because it goes against our instincts to protect, but we're really not in the end, are we? Because they're continuing to use the drug. They could be in an accident. It's the tough thing. It's the courage to say, no, you can't come home, and I'm not going to bail you out, and I'm not going to, you have to choose this for yourself, because ultimately it's your choice, right?
That's right.
Yeah, it's tough though, isn't it, huh?
It is hard.
Yeah.
It is hard.
Yeah. So what I was going to ask you, you talked about all the resources that are currently available. What I was going to ask, from your perspective, and you get a big picture view of things, the things that need to be addressed, where there are kind of breaks in the system. What do we, as a community, as a nation, what are the things that we have to really do now to up the ante in this, to solve the problem? What do you see we need to do next?
Yeah, this system is entirely broken.
Yeah.
This system being that of substance abuse disorder treatment, and the way this nation is not addressing this issue, and the Commonwealth is not addressing this issue. So I'll give you some clear examples. The barrier to treatment is extremely high, extremely high. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's start out by financial. Right now, we have insurance parity was announced for substance abuse disorder on the state level, meaning that insurance companies are compelled to cover substance abuse disorder as an illness. Unfortunately, that coverage is limited to 14 days of inpatient treatment. That would be the equivalent, Anne, of me saying to somebody, I'm sorry that you have lymphoma. You've got 30 days to get it cleared up. Good luck to you.
Yeah.
And then you're out on your own.
Right,
and it's
send them back
pay.
out and yeah.
It's not parity. Patrick Kennedy has been tremendously instrumental, and was instrumental, in the Mental Health Parity Act. And he is also very vocal about this issue in getting true insurance parity. So right now you've got a failure in our insurance system, our financial system, to recognize this as an illness and treat it just as any other illness. That's number one. Number two, we have the lack of availability of beds.
Ah, big time.
So there are no beds in Massachusetts to be had, pretty much. On a daily basis, I get phone calls from people who are searching for beds.
But this issue's been out there for a while.
It certainly has.
So, and I know that this was an issue months and years ago in terms of no beds. Any progress made on that? Is that
some progress?
Some?
The governor has, I believe, and I'm going to, don't quote me on this,
right,
but I think it's around $23 million that was allocated towards this particular issue, and they're talking about 110 beds coming online. Governor Baker is really taking this issue on.
Good. Oh, that's good to know.
Head on. Unfortunately, that's just not enough beds.
No.
Nearly enough, and secondarily, getting access to those beds, as I said before, with the difficulty with the insurance regulations is almost impossible. Right now, and when a parent is presented, even with a child or a loved one that wants to go to treatment, the difficulty in navigating the system is almost insurmountable. If you go into your computer screens at home right now and you just type in help for addiction, you're going to get 1,000 ads for a whole bunch of different treatment facilities that cost anywhere from $12,000 to $17,000 per month private pay. It's unacceptable. This disease knows no socioeconomic bounds. It knows no dividing factors. We're all in this together. The old days of thinking of a heroin junkie lying in a street alley somewhere are over. These are you and I walking around the streets with the introduction of OxyContin and Percocet as pain pills back 15 or 20 years ago. This has become a common suburban and inner city problem. We need to address it as the public health crisis that it is. There are some resources I'd like to mention. Learn to Cope.
Yes.
It's learn2cope.org. And anybody listening today can go on that website. They can register for a private forum. It's available 24/7. There are over 10,000 people on that forum. There are many health professionals on that forum, and they will find a plethora of information in terms of where to turn for treatment.
I didn't realize that all that information was on that website.
It's all there.
That's great.
And they're also, I say there are some nonprofits in the Commonwealth that are currently working, I believe it's with the Department of Public Health, to come up with a central database.
That's what's missing.
Right, so that it can be voluntary, it will be voluntary, so that facilities will self-report in on their bed availability. So if Dr. Derick has a patient in front of him that wants rehabilitation treatment for a specific issue, maybe it's opiate abuse, he needs detox, and then he or she needs to go on to long-term treatment, he can pull up in real time who has beds available, whether it's Gosnold on the Cape or whether it's the Plymouth House or whatever the facility is, and he can see if there's a bed quickly and dispense with the treatment quickly. And that's a big issue, because with this disease, you may have an issue with somebody presenting to you and saying, I'm ready, and literally 2 minutes later they change their mind because the power of that drug pulls them back.
That's right, yeah. So it's just, it's interesting, because I had an acquaintance who was struggling with an adult son and who has substance abuse disorder, and she didn't know what to do and didn't know who to call. So I called you and say, but it would be so good if there were just like a place, and it sounds like through this Learn to Cope on the website, there's a way of getting questions answered and resources for this and ways to get help there. So that's important for people to know.
There are, and we have meetings here in Franklin.
Yes.
There are 21 chapters in the state of Learn to Cope. I have to mention Kathy Getchell. Kathy Getchell was instrumental in bringing Learn to Cope to the town of Franklin. I am eternally grateful, as are the other members of Learn to Cope. We've grown from a small group of 10 or 12 people meeting to over 40 people meeting at the First Unitarian Universalist Church on Pleasant Street in Franklin, 262 Pleasant Street.
Yep.
Is that right?
Chestnut? Or
Chestnut Street.
Chestnut.
You can edit that out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's 262 Chestnut Street.
Right.
In Franklin. It meets every Monday evening at 7 o'clock. It goes from 7 o'clock to 9. The format is open. You may come in as long as you have a loved one that you're concerned about their substance abuse. It doesn't have to be a child. It can be an adult. It can be a grandparent. It doesn't matter. You do not have to speak at the meetings. You can simply listen. It's entirely anonymous and confidential. Importantly, we have trained Narcan providers and trained Narcan trainers that will train you on how to use Narcan. And Narcan is an injectable, rather a nasal spray, opiate reversal drug. It's entirely harmless. It does not, there's no allergic reaction to it. It's benign, but what it will do is reverse an opiate overdose. And that's what the police are carrying. Some school nurses are carrying it now. So that if you have somebody at risk living in your home that's actively using, you definitely want to come down to a Learn to Cope meeting and get Narcan, so that if they do overdose, you can deal with it until 911
And the training is provided right there, as you said.
Training is free of charge, and the Narcan is free
And I
of
think the
charge.
power of it, too, is people to realize they're not alone. Because as you've been saying, it's such a painful journey to have to go through as a loved one of someone who's suffering, and that support network that kind of provides a source of comfort, doesn't it? It's just
does,
pretty
and
powerful.
you know, the people with substance abuse disorder, and we know a lot of them in long-term recovery. I've come to, the recovery community is a phenomenal community. I can't say enough about the courage of these young men and women, and older young men and women. The courage and the strength that they have, having gone through this disease, still living with it, and successfully conquering it on a day-by-day basis, is really, really breathtaking in some cases, in all cases, really, frankly, that I've had to interact with them. And they are a tremendous resource to parents. And we do have them come to Learn to Cope meetings to share what it's like, so that people can get a window into what their loved one might be feeling, and why the pull is so tremendous towards a drug, because that's the big question parents have. Why are you choosing to do this to us, to yourself? Why are you killing yourself? And the point is, it's not a choice.
That's it.
And so it's crucial that parents get that help, and they get some sort of understanding of the disease process.
And it's true, it's in listening to people like Derick Getchell and Dr. Kelly, when he spoke about how long the process to get out of it is, that it's such a long journey, and that you think, you know, your kid's doing well, and then like 8 months and then relapses, and then it has to start, and it's such a long journey, isn't it, when you talk about getting out of addiction and how long it takes sometimes, right?
It's absolutely excruciating for a parent, and I think I started to talk about the recovery community before because Derick Getchell mentioned to me, he said, you know, one day he said, you know, Mr. Derick, he said, we have the solution to our pain. It's not a good solution, but we're numbed, we're drugged while we're going through this. You're not, as parents and loved ones. It's awfully painful, isn't it? And painful doesn't even cover it. It's excruciating to see your loved one go through something like this. They're numb, and you're left dealing with this emotional roller coaster. And yes, the relapses are difficult to deal with when they happen, and they often do happen. But as many in the recovery community and the profession tell us, inform us, that while relapses happen, it's part of the process of recovery. And as long as it's not a fatal relapse, the individual has a great chance of building on the experiences that they had. Those experiences don't go away if they relapse, and they can build on them and get into long-term recovery, even though there may be some bumps along the way.
One of the resources Derick pointed out also is Al-Anon and the value of that. I mean, certainly for him, AA and that whole spiritual piece that he, you know, like he said, it replaced the pain, the void that the drugs are filling is when he was able to get all that AA offered him. Such a powerful resource out there as well, isn't it?
Sure
so,
is.
Yeah, but I, on behalf of the community, I just want to thank you for all that you're doing and the courage to share.
And thank you.
I know you're just tireless in the support that you're giving to families, so I want to thank you. And
well, thank you very much.
So again, this is It Takes a Village, Raising Resilient Kids in Today's World. My name is Dr. Ann Bergen. Thank you.